Somewhere in a hospital right now, a doctor is asking a patient a simple question. What's your blood type? It sounds routine, the kind of detail you rattle off without thinking right after your name and date of birth. But that short answer, 2 letters and a symbol, is actually one of the oldest pieces of information your body carries. It didn't start with modern medicine. It started tens of thousands of years before anyone thought to write anything down. This is the story of blood type O positive, the most common blood type on Earth, and what scientists are only now beginning to understand about where it came from, what it protects against, and why hospitals can never seem to get enough of it. Let's start with the basics, because most of us only half remember them from school. Human blood is grouped by the ABO system, A, B, AB, and O, and by the Rh factor, the positive or negative that follows. Together, they decide who can safely receive blood from whom. That much is common knowledge. What's less well known is how old this system actually is. Researchers studying primate genetics have traced the origins of the ABO blood groups back tens of millions of years, long before modern humans existed, to a common ancestor shared by humans and other primates. In other words, this isn't something that appeared with our species. It's a biological structure that has been carried forward, generation after generation, across an almost unimaginable stretch of time. Evolution tends to discard things that don't serve a purpose. The fact that this system has persisted for so long is, on its own, a signal of just how important it must be. Among the blood types, O is generally considered the oldest, with types A and B thought to have branched off later as populations adapted to new environments and new diseases. That doesn't make O better. Evolution doesn't really work in terms of better or worse, but it does mean type O blood represents something close to the original template, the base structure that other types were built on top of. To understand why, it helps to zoom into the molecular level for a moment. Red blood cells carry small identifying markers on their surface called antigens. Your immune system uses these markers constantly to tell the difference between your own cells and anything foreign that might be a threat. People with type A blood have the A antigen. People with type B have the B antigen. People with AB have both, and people with type O have neither. Their red blood cells carry a simpler base structure known as the H antigen, without the additional sugar molecules that define A and B. That absence is exactly why type O blood is known as the universal donor. Without the A or B markers to trigger a reaction, it can be given to patients of almost any blood type in an emergency, when there's no time to run a full compatibility test. It's also why researchers have spent years trying to find ways to convert other blood types into type O, using enzymes that can strip away the extra sugar molecules on A and B cells. If that technology matures, it could ease one of the most persistent shortages in modern medicine, the constant worldwide demand for type O blood, especially the negative variant, which is used in emergencies and for newborns whose blood type isn't yet known. Now, here's where the story becomes genuinely interesting, because blood type isn't just a matter of compatibility on a hospital chart. It appears to be linked in measurable ways to certain health outcomes. Multiple studies over the years have found that people with type O blood tend to have somewhat lower levels of certain clotting factors in their blood, including one called von Willebrand factor. Because these proteins play a role in how easily blood clots form, some research has linked type O blood to a modestly lower risk of certain cardiovascular events, such as blood clots and stroke. It's worth being precise here. This is a statistical association, not a guarantee for any individual. And lifestyle, genetics, and countless other factors still matter enormously. The same research points in the other direction too. Type O has been associated in various studies with a slightly higher susceptibility to certain conditions, including stomach ulcers linked to H. pylori infection, and, in some studies, a higher risk of cholera symptoms. No blood type comes with a clean sheet of only advantages. What the evidence suggests is more like a trade-off, a set of strengths paired with a set of vulnerabilities, shaped by whatever pressures our ancestors faced in the environments where these blood types became common. One of the clearest examples of this trade-off involves malaria. Several studies have found that the parasite responsible for the most severe form of malaria has more difficulty binding to type O red blood cells compared to other types, which may offer a degree of natural resistance. This lines up with something researchers have long observed. Type O. Blood tends to be more common in regions where malaria has historically been a major cause of death, including large parts of Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. It's a compelling example of natural selection working over thousands of years. Populations where type O offered a survival edge against malaria simply had more descendants who carried that same blood type forward. More recently, the COVID-19 pandemic gave researchers an unusual opportunity to study blood type on a massive scale, comparing outcomes across millions of people worldwide. Several studies, though not all, and not without disagreement in the scientific literature, reported that people with type O blood appeared somewhat less likely to test positive for the virus, and in some cases showed a lower risk of severe complications. One proposed explanation ties back to those same clotting factors. Since COVID-19 could trigger dangerous clotting in some patients, and type A blood tends to carry higher levels of clotting-related proteins than type O, researchers speculated this might partly explain the difference. It's an interesting thread of research, but scientists are careful to note that blood type was just one small factor among many. Age, underlying health conditions, and vaccination status mattered far more in determining outcomes. So, where does all of this history actually come from? For a long time, this was guesswork. Scientists could study blood types in living populations and infer what might have happened in the past, but they couldn't look directly at ancient DNA. That has changed. In recent years, researchers have been able to extract and analyze genetic material from ancient human remains, including Homo sapiens, who lived tens of thousands of years ago, and Neanderthal remains dating back over 100,000 years. One striking study, led by researchers at Aix-Marseille University in France, examined blood group genes across more than 20 ancient Homo sapiens individuals and more than a dozen Neanderthals. What they found was unexpected. Blood group genes in Homo sapiens diversified rapidly after our ancestors left Africa, somewhere between roughly 70 and 45,000 years ago. As they moved into new environments and encountered new pathogens, Neanderthals, by contrast, showed far less genetic change in their blood groups over a comparable stretch of time. A difference researchers linked to Neanderthals living in smaller, more isolated populations. Some scientists have even suggested that this reduced genetic flexibility may have made Neanderthal populations more vulnerable to disease, one of several factors that may have contributed to their eventual disappearance. One particularly evocative detail from this research involves the Persian Plateau, a region stretching across parts of modern-day Iran. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that as early Homo sapiens migrated out of Africa, groups paused in this region for an extended period. Estimates suggest somewhere in the range of 15,000 years before continuing on into the rest of Eurasia. Researchers believe this extended stay may have given human populations time to develop new genetic variations, effectively acting as a waypoint where the genetic diversity we still carry today began to take shape. It's worth pausing on what that actually means. The variations in your blood, the very ones a lab technician checks before a transfusion, carry an echo of a migration that happened before recorded history. Before agriculture, before cities, before written language. Every population that survived the diseases, the climates, and the isolation of that journey passed something forward. Not a memory in any conscious sense, but a molecular configuration that still shows up in blood tests today. And the science hasn't stopped. Blood typing turns out to be far more complex than most of us learned in school. Beyond ABO and RH, researchers have identified dozens of additional blood group systems, subtle variations in the proteins that coat our red blood cells. In 2024, an international team led by NHS Blood and Transplant in the United Kingdom, working alongside researchers in Israel, solved a 50-year-old mystery by identifying the genetic basis of a rare blood marker known as ANWJ. Their discovery established what's now recognized as the 47th blood group system, named MAL, after the protein involved. It's a reminder that even something as seemingly settled as blood type is still an active area of research, with real consequences for patients who have rare blood profiles and need carefully matched transfusions. All of which brings us back to a fairly ordinary and genuinely large-scale modern problem: blood shortages. Type O blood, and O negative in particular, is in near constant demand at hospitals worldwide, precisely because it's the type used in emergencies, before a patient's exact blood type is known. It's also needed for newborns and for people undergoing certain medical treatments. Because it's both common and universally usable in a crisis, it tends to be consumed faster than any other type can be donated. That paradox, the most common blood type also being the most chronically needed, is one of the quieter, ongoing challenges facing blood services across Europe and around the world, and one of the simplest reasons blood donation drives keep asking for donors. Step back from all the individual details, the ancient DNA, the malaria resistance, the clotting proteins, the pandemic studies, and a broader picture starts to emerge. Blood type isn't just an administrative label on a hospital form. It's a genetic trait shaped over an extraordinarily long stretch of human history, carrying the faint signature of environments our ancestors lived through and diseases they survived. Type O, as the oldest and most widespread of the ABO types, carries perhaps the deepest version of that signature. None of this means your health is predetermined by 2 letters and a symbol. Blood type is one thread in a much larger genetic tapestry, and researchers are careful to stress that lifestyle, environment, and overall health still play the dominant role in most outcomes. But it is a reminder of something easy to forget in daily life, that the body each of us carries is not really new. It's a continuation, a very long, very quiet inheritance, still being read letter by scientists who are only now developing the tools to understand it properly. So the next time someone asks for your blood type, it might be worth remembering that the answer is older than you think, and that somewhere in that simple label, there is still a great deal left to discover.